Are you also confused and wondering if you should be starting your career from a startup, medium enterprise, or a large enterprise? Or are you in a position where you have secured a job offer and now you have to make a call if you should make that transition or not, and you are aiming to go from a large enterprise to a startup, or from startup to a large enterprise or medium enterprise? In this video, we are going to discuss some parameters that help you determine or get an overview of what are the pros and cons of working with large enterprises, medium enterprises, and startups, and what are the parameters that you should take into consideration whenever you are evaluating any job offer, whenever you are thinking of making a career move. These are the things that you should consider, and let's get started. We would be using a 3-point scale that would be low, medium, and high. When we say low, then that means for that certain parameter, the chances or the probability would be a bit low. If we talk about medium, then that means the probability is somewhere in the middle. And when we talk about high, that means the chances and the probability are a bit higher. The parameters that we're going to talk about, the first one is the visibility. So visibility is basically being visible to the executive management. When you talk about a startup, yes, in startup, because there are less people, everyone knows you. There could be 50 people, for example, 10 people. So the executive management, CEO, CTO, or whoever is running the show would know that how are you performing your job and etc. That has its pros and cons, but I consider it to be a pro. In startups, the biggest advantage is that you have high visibility and thus a good chances of being recognized and acknowledged. When you move to medium enterprises, so medium enterprises have somewhere between medium visibility because there is a reasonable hierarchy. There are 500 people, so people know you, but some might also not know you out of those 500 people, and things you do might not get acknowledged at that level. Visibility in the large enterprises is a bit tricky topic. You would be known in your division, you would be known with the people you work with, but not everyone in the organization would know you, which is good and bad. Your executive management should know you. If they don't know you exist, if they don't know that what are the key topics you're working on, chances of you getting promotions or recognition or acknowledgements are very low. This is an important point to consider if you are curious about or conscious about your visibility and progression. Then talking about the second point, which is the growth. Growth is your probability and chances of getting into newer positions. Of course, growth in startups is a bit higher because you have better visibility, your chances of growth are a bit higher. There are less people. So if you have worked for 2 years in a startup, you could potentially become a director as well, depending on the positions. And similarly, if you go to medium enterprise, the growth is comparatively lower. And when you move to large enterprises, the growth becomes difficult because there are a lot of people, there's a lot of competition, not everyone knows you. It takes time for you to build a reputation and then get going from there. Now, it is important to note that we are talking about the growth in a certain company. Then coming to the diverse experience. The diverse experience perspective, I would rate startups to be on a higher end, and then medium enterprises have somewhere in the middle because there are a lot of people doing similar things. So you are a bit focused in a certain domain. And when we go to large enterprises, they are generally focused. So someone in large enterprise working in infrastructure team might not know anything about development. However, someone working in a startup, working in development team might also know about infrastructure, right? Because they have clear segregation. Startups, there is no clear segregation, and you could be wearing multiple hats. Then this brings to another point, that is exposure. Say exposure, it is the industry exposure you get. You're working for a startup company, the company is small, the business is comparatively small, so not everyone would know you. If you're a startup company, then your clients would also be somewhere medium enterprises. The chances of you addressing the large market segment are very thin. So exposure is a bit low in the startups. When you move to medium enterprises, the exposure that you get there is a bit in the middle because you are not working with very small companies, you are working with somewhere medium and large enterprises. That gives you an exposure. And when you talk about large enterprises, that's where you get the most exposure of the industry because you are probably working with giants. You would not be working with small and medium enterprises. You would not be following all the industry best practices. It is important to note that exposure is important, and you can get an excellent exposure of the industry in medium and large enterprises. Then when we talk about networking, so it also has to do with the exposure. If you work in a startup, you 50 people, you talk to them, you work with certain clients, so not many people in the industry would know you. You would not be probably meeting the like-minded people unless you attend events and etc. But in your current role, you would not be talking to so many people. This changes a bit when you are working with medium enterprise because you talk to different people, you talk to them, so you have good chances of growth. And this varies drastically, and this is a very positive point of working with large enterprises, that you build a big network, because you build a network with your coworkers who are in hundreds, you build a network with your clients who are also in, if not in hundreds, at least in tens. So people know you, you have got good networking, people know you that you're working for that enterprise. And again, it also depends from organization to organization. Remember, we are not talking about exceptions here. Yes, there could be startups on the earth that are the best startups in the world, but here we are not talking from that perspective, we are talking general. So when we talk about the neutral points, the biggest one is the compensation. What kind of compensation you could get in medium enterprise, small startup, or a large enterprise. And to be honest, what I have seen, there is no hard and fast rule. Sometimes startups are even paying more than a large enterprise. Sometimes large enterprises are paying far more than a startup. So it is very subjective. And I would say it is your personal choice. What do you prefer with? For me, compensation is neutral. There is another thing which is equally important, and people sometimes put even more weight to it than the compensation or the salary itself, and those are the benefits and the rewards. What are the perks that you're getting by working in these companies? I have seen people making career moves just because of the fact that they got better perks from another company. So it is again very subjective, and I would say that all the companies offer similar kind of things. It's very subjective. Then another parameter is the job security. With the situation in the market, it doesn't matter if you work for a startup or a large enterprise. I talked about this in one of my previous videos, that job security is also very subjective, because any business can get impacted. The only difference would be that if it's a big business, large business, they may have the capacity to bear you or take your load for additional 5 months. However, a startup might ask you to leave right away. Job security for me is almost the same. Then I talk about office politics. Politics is also very subjective to an organization culture. It has to do with the people or the leadership, how they run the company, because it is something that is driven top down. If a company has a political culture, because of whatever reasons, of course, there are certain reasons for a company to have a political culture. It varies a lot, but in my understanding, political culture in an organization or organization culture is also very subjective, and it could vary from startup to large enterprise and vice versa. Then another important point is the satisfaction index. Basically, it is again a very subjective point, because satisfaction index depends on you. You decide what is important for you. If you want recognition, acknowledgements, then it doesn't matter if you're working for a startup company or a large enterprise. If you're not getting those, you're not gonna get satisfied. However, if these things don't matter to you, then in that case, again, doesn't matter which company do you work for, because this is very subjective and personal to you, and you decide how do you get or feel satisfied by doing the job or moving on your career. See, we do a job to make our lifestyle better, and name of the company that you work with also plays an important role for a lot of people. So some people prefer to work in startups because they don't care if they are working for a small company or big company. When I say small or big, I'm saying in terms of name. They don't care with what kind of company they are working with. They want to focus on getting money and enjoying the work they do. On the contrary, there are people who want to work for large enterprises, the big names in the world, so that they can have a social standing that, you know what, I work in that company. So also varies from person to person. In my opinion, company name matters to an extent, but it is not the deal breaker for me, right? A startup paying me good, giving me job satisfaction, I would say is better than working for a large enterprise and I'm still not happy, right? It depends on each and individual. These were some parameters that I wanted to discuss today to give you an idea on what are the things that you can consider when you are moving on. I know you could be wondering, Sajid, when you are saying everything is subjective, you are putting it on our shoulders and telling us, you should decide for yourself. And actually that's the truth, that you decide for yourself what suits you the best. And it is important to note that your choices would vary depending on your circumstances. If you are a bachelor, your circumstances are different. If you are in your 20s, your circumstances are different, so does your career choices. When you are in your 30s, your career choices would be a bit different because by that time you have already gained quite reasonable kind of experience. When you are in your 40s, your career choices would change further. So it changes with time, and it also varies and depends on what kind of career level are you in. Are you starting your job as an entry level? Are you already in a mid-senior, or are you already in an executive position? We'll be discussing this in a separate video, and I hope that this video have been helpful. Please remember that these points that we discussed in this video are very subjective. They vary from person to person. This is my opinion. Of course, you can disagree, but I'm confident enough to say that most of you who are into job or have been doing a job for a reasonable amount of time would to an extent agree with me. If you disagree or agree, let me know. And if there is some important parameter that I have missed, please let me know in the comments, and looking forward to hearing from you. And if you like this video, stay tuned and see you in the next video.